All right, Jack. So let's start with the beginning of your football experience. At what point did you know that you could go to college and become a punter?
I was 23 years old, so I was a little late in the game. My mother sat me down one day. I think I was working at Red Robin, and she sat me down and said, "You need to go to school. You're wasting a lot of your time." I was like, "Okay, great. Are you going to pay for it?" And she's like, "No, I'm not going to pay for it, but you need to go." So, my whole foundation of playing college football was kind of predicated on the fact that I could kick far and kick ball, when I was a kid. So everyone used to say, "Oh, back up, jacks up," and I was like, "I could probably do something with my legs." So I went on YouTube when I was 23 and learned how to punt, and watch some film. I never played football, I never played helmet before, but that was the quickest avenue to free school, and that's an underserved market because no one wants to be the punter. So that's kind of how it happened.
So, what was your sport experience like growing up?
Growing up, I played little league baseball for a while, but basketball was my main sport. I played in high school. I was decent after high school. I worked at the gym and got really good. I got a starting spot on my junior college team in my town. I was supposed to play at a high level college, but got injured, so I had to get a couple of chest surgeries, which is why I led to punting. I mean, I'm 6'4", 220. I didn't want to be a punter, trust me, but that was just the most safe option. So it was mostly basketball, and then I fell into football.
So, when you pitched that to your parents, like, hey, I think I'm gonna go back to school and also I'm going to be a punter.
Hmm.
What was the reception?
Yeah, they were used to me saying just absurd things with no foundation or reasoning. So it wasn't out of the ordinary. It was definitely up to par with how I've been behaving the past, at the time, 23 years. Um, I think my mom just said okay. Like she would have if I told her I was gonna go get something to eat that day. She just said okay, like okay, it's fine. And then my dad, it was a similar reaction. They were pretty used to it. And I don't think they thought it would go the way it did, but they definitely thought I would go for it.
A lot of times over the course of this podcast, I talk my guests through their youth sport experience and how it kind of becomes their collegiate sport experience. When you're joining a sport that late in the game, what is your relationship with football looking like?
It didn't exist. It didn't exist. From Baltimore, I watched the Ravens play growing up, but I never wanted to play Pop Warner. I never wanted to play high school. And frankly, I didn't understand the sport at the time. I learned football throughout my college career. I could name all the positions my first 2 years. I didn't know how to put pads on, so the relationship was very, very rudimentary. It was very non-existent. I was always athletic, so I could throw a football, I could catch a football, I could run, but I never dove into what football I would eventually be until I did.
I mean, what did the recruitment look like? Did you reach out to them and say, "Hey, I'm interested in being a punter"?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have a not as good of an answer, but so I didn't have any film. Obviously, I was 23 years old with no football film. So I bought one ball at Walmart. I bought a pair of cleats from Ross, and then I would film myself punting and make these videos. And I catch on to things quicker than I probably should. Not like bragging or saying I'm the best because I wasn't, and I'm still not. But it was impressive for where I was in my punting journey because I never touched football in my life. So I was sending these videos to these coaches, and they would respond. Like most of them respond and say, "That's impressive." I'm like, "Really? That's impressive." So, um, and I really think what helps is that the position I was targeting was a very underserved and underutilized position. Like, I mean, if you're first of all, any punter who's 6'4", 220, you already have an advantage on most other punters. So I would always include my height and weight, and I would show them film, and then um, it was interesting, and that's what I was told a lot. Like your story is very interesting, Jack. You have a lot of potential, but no one really pulled the trigger on me until someone did. Um, and in my first season of football, I was terrible. I was the worst punter in our conference at junior college in Arizona. But it was that game film I needed to get to the next step to show and prove to coaches that I wasn't gonna freak out under pressure or drop a snap or something like that.
Speaking of freaking out under pressure, what was your first experience with mental health as it related to athlete performance?
My first experience.
I mean, you'd been an athlete all your life, but like
Yeah.
competitively at a college level, what was your first experience with mental health to perform?
Yeah. So I don't like the spotlight. I never have. Playing basketball in high school, I never wanted to take a free throw because that means everybody's looking at me. And then here I am as a punter, and I get four opportunities a game. And if I do poorly, everyone in the stadium hates me. So that's not exactly my favorite concept around football. But I think the mental health barrier for me, at least, was allowing myself to just focus on the job, not the distraction, not the noise, not the people trying to run at me and kill me because I'm the punter and the easy target, but just focusing on what I know I'm able to do. And I think that helped me a lot through my college career because, as times got hard, as I underperformed, as we lost games, as I did drop snaps, and I told myself that, coaches always tell you to be perfect, and coaches aren't perfect, and players aren't perfect, and the game isn't perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. So I kind of allow myself and give myself a little bit of grace in that regard. Kind of helped me a lot. But yeah, it's a good question. Hmm.
When did you first see the need for a specialized cleat? Because that is so specific.
Yeah. So it was before my punting career, before my college career. I was 19 years old. I was a housekeeper in a national park, and I was a college dropout. And actually, I wasn't a dropout. I didn't even go to college yet. And my father and I, back home in Maryland, were watching a football game, and someone went down with a non-contact ACL tear. And he and I are both like, "Man, it looks so preventable." I think it takes an outsider to really realize what what the inside needs, if that makes sense. And there was two guys, one guy who really couldn't even read and do much. And then my father, who was a marketing guy for 30 years, we both like, if something was were to give, I thought that injury wouldn't have happened. So that was the first time we saw a need. And I watched the game live. It was Jamal Charles, the Kansas City Chiefs running back, and he went down, and it just like so many things clicked. I didn't know I had the ability to realize it needed to be clicked. You know what I mean? So it all aligned pretty well.
I mean, there's a ton of research out about cleats and natural grass versus turf and lower extremity injuries. I mean, I read some of what was listed on your website as well. You're not the first to voice something like this. Why were you the first to take action?
So I wasn't. Um, I wasn't. So I wrote the first patent in my house when I was 19, 20 years old. And I had to cite patents from the 70s. And everyone's been trying to figure this out for decades. They put these big mechanical metal swivels in the front of cleats and then make them pivot and sway. But it's impractical from a manufacturing standpoint. They weigh 4 pounds. You can't compete in that. So I think my approach has not been a novel one, but it's definitely been the most practical novel one, if that makes sense. I think companies have tried to do what I do in the past and they just failed because it's a very tedious, fragile um, inner working as it relates to how the shoe is constructed. And my team in Oregon, I give the credit all to them. They figured out a way to do it and make my dream come true. But and you're right. There is a contentious debate between grass and turf and the way we train and the age we train and all those variables that we have a part of, but are kind of out of reach. But the one thing we can't control is we put on our feet, and the most important thing, and that's why we're here.
I mean, you played 4 seasons of college football. Were you paying attention to your feet at that point?
Mine, no, because if I'm being honest with you, Julia, I spent most of practice just staying on the sideline because that's what punters do. But everybody else is, I mean, yeah, like I would watch practice and I would watch the relationship these people have with the ground as it relates to how receivers would cut and how quarterbacks would drop back and how a lot alignments would kick. I think that's a movement that we are underappreciating and underutilizing because if you were to make contact with your helmet 5, 10 times a game, those are pretty impactful moments for sure. But your feet utilized for movement 1,000 times a game. It is how we move and operate. And our relationship we have with the ground is not been innovated or changed in decades. So I think me watching people hate their cleats and hate putting them on. And the best part about practice, I'm not going to lie to you, is taking cleats off. And like that's a relationship that we need to understand a little deeper. So yeah, absolutely, let's pay attention.
What was the process of creating prototypes like? I mean,
Uh,
are we talking months? Are we talking years?
Years
Prior
for
to the
sure.
patents, what did that process look like of kind of fine tuning?
So the prototype phase was interesting. I did it in a very messy way. So, at the time I was reaching out to a bunch of doctors and orthopedic surgeons and biomechanists about my idea, about my concept. Because I spent the last 12 months reading about biomechanics and physics and just what it takes to tear ACL and what happens when that torque in the knee gets excessive. But I couldn't show anybody anything because I had no patent, I had no prototype. So what I did was I started googling ways to make transparent like rubbery substances. Because if I could take a cleat sole and cut it out and apply a rubbery cleat sole to the bottom of it, I could show people that there's something tangible here that can move and operate independently. So what I did was, if you can, it sounds ridiculous. If you combine blue dish soap and quick hardening caulk, it creates that transparent rubbery substance. I know it's a bit bizarre, um, but I cut a cleat sole off and I would put it in this kind of blast, and then I would fill it with the old material, and I'd have this exact cleat sole that's made from this transparent alien jellyfish looking thing. And I took that to university out west and I presented it to him. I said, look, this moves like this when you apply force to it. And they're like, oh, we see it. I'm like, God, do you really? That's great news. So, and at that time, I was writing the patent. So I was making cleats in my garage, writing the patent. My dad was helping when he could. And fast forward a few years, we get hooked up with this team in Oregon called iGenerator. And these guys are the best. Like, they're incredible. And I brought my cleat to them. We're like, all right, well, this is this is tough to look at, but they made prototypes that had more practicality to them, um, and I think through them we were able to kind of funnel and define our vision a little bit more clear. So the prototypes, my last year at that school, Missouri, I played in Missouri Western. Um, I got prototypes on my teammates. And I was like, does this feel okay? Do you feel it moving? Like, are you concerned? And everyone's like, no, it's fine. Like, but that was a solid benchmark for me. Fine was a great benchmark for me at the time. So, and then as this thing progressed, as I decided to do this full time and make cleats and make a company and establish a brand, we had to take what we had built and make it our own. So we only been selling cleats for 2 years, actually less than 2 years. Sorry. But 3 years ago, we got a prototype that we actually felt decent about. And it was the one that emulated this technology that we currently see today. So it was definitely a lengthy process, but it was a fun process and a lot of learning involved for sure.
What was the patenting process like now that you had a prototype?
That was extremely arduous and draining, and especially for a 20-year-old kid who had never read a book in his life. But we had a friend at the patent office, my dad and I, went to my dad's church. So we kind of utilized him for a lot of insight and advice and just how to approach certain aspects of the USPTO. But I sat down and I wrote probably 60 pages of a patent. My dad wrote his version. We combined ours. His had way fewer grammatical errors than mine. And we kind of presented to this guy and we're like, hey, is this enough to file? And he's like, yeah, it totally is. Now we had to reiterate some claims every once in a while because they kept being rejected by the USPTO, which is standard if a kid writes a patent. But it was it was lengthy. And I remember I'll never forget August 11th, 2019. He emailed us and said that it got awarded. So I Googled my name and a patent came up. And that was a very special moment for me. That was one of the most special moments I've had in this company. But since then I've hired a patent attorney because I can't do it anymore. So now we have 14 patents. But the first one is very special to me. And that process was really, really tough. It was really, really, really special.
So, I mean, you got patented at 20 years old and then you went to college.
Mhm.
What's your degree in?
That's a good question too. So I have an undergrad in recreational management, which means nothing, by the way. And while I was at school, the business department found out about my patent, and they're like, "You should go to that. You should get an MBA program." And I was like, "I don't even have a business credit. Like, I'm not even sure what business is." And like, we'll get you in for sure. So they actually got me in. I got an MBA because they kind of saw this coming, I guess, and good for them for seeing it. I sure didn't, but they got me in the program, and I got a master's in business from. It wasn't a Harvard, but it was a master's. So, but I think at the time I was from an MBA. I was so deep in this business stuff already that I didn't have a single business credit or class under my belt, but I had a business under my belt. So it was a pretty seamless experience.
I mean, I feel like if you don't have a business credit, but you have a business with
Yeah.
patents, I think you're off the hook, right?
Yeah.
Like, you check off that eligibility a little bit.
To some degree, absolutely.
I mean, so like now you're 24, 25, graduating from college. You have 4 years of punting, multiple patents, you have a business. What does your life look like?
So I'm going to correct you a little bit. I was 27 when I stopped college. So I started when I was 23.
Okay.
So my life, ooh, so there's a lot of different aspects about my life that I really appreciate. I worked in several national parks. I love being outside. I used to be like a surf, live in my car, bum. I love hiking and just being outside and fly fishing. And there's that aspect of me that wants to just go say screw it and kind of get off the grid and just figure it out. So when I graduated with my master's from Missouri Western, I worked at REI and I was selling like kayaks and bikes, and it was great. I had a great time. But then I had one more year because of COVID and my surgeries and whatever. So I was this 27-year-old with a master's who had one more season left. So I went to a school in New Mexico. It was next to a national forest. It was always warm. I was in the mountains. I just wanted to hang out and punt, and that's what we did. And I got good at punting that year. But when I was done, I became an All-American that year, and a lot of NFL teams called my agent, and I went to these camps and these pro days, and I did really well. And I was supposed to go to a couple different teams, but when it got down to the medical side of investigating me as an individual, they didn't like my surgery history. I didn't either. So I didn't get picked up. So I coached one season in Colorado with my former coach in New Mexico. And at that time, I could have gone a few ways. I had a few different paths. I could have kept coaching. I could have kept pursuing the NFL. I could have been a fly fishing guide in Alaska or a national park. But then I felt this need to, explore the cleat opportunity more. So I thought that was the most time sensitive one. Um, so my quarterback from Mexico and I just kind of took over it and just went for it. I mean, I stopped coaching. I moved back home. I figured out how to raise more money and sign athletes and make product, and it was exciting. And like that's the kind of unknown that I look forward to every day. And that was such a big, giant slap in the face of an unknown, and it was great.
So, if my timeline is correct, you got the patent and then like half a decade later, you didn't plan on doing anything with it?
Yeah, so it's a very weird timeline because of my age and the way I approach everything, to be honest with you. So, I applied for the patent when I was 20. I hung out in national parks for a few years. My mom said to go to school. At the time, the patent's still getting reviewed. It takes a while, especially when a kid writes it. And I ended up going to school at 23. 24 was how old I was when the patent got approved. And I started, raising family and friends money, doing some preliminary testing from certain labs just to gain some sort of credibility with the product. And then, I'm still working on the shoe as I'm in college. It's just not as much because I'm in school. I'm on a football team. I'm not going to drop out. I certainly wanted to, but I'm not going to drop out for my mother. But then when I get done, it was kind of like all systems go, and that was the only time that I could have given it the effort it deserved because I was always busy with something else or some other 19 things. So yeah, it was a lot of waiting, but great things take time. And if you rush it, it's not going to be, it's always the wrong time until it's not. So if I would have done this 6 years ago, like this, it might not have worked out the way it did today.
I mean, speaking of right place, right time, using your patents and pitching them to your college teammates, what was the buy-in like there?
Yeah, it was tough to get it was tough to get buy-in because I was always this very like I don't know, not outspoken, but just energetic old punter with tattoos and probably a crazy beard at the time. And like people are like, you don't have a patent. I'm like, no, I do have a patent. Like you gotta trust me. And then I would show them the product, and they'd be like, "You made this," and I'd be like, "Yeah, absolutely, I made this. Like, what do you think I do all day besides practice? I don't go to school. I work on this stuff." So it took some convincing because no one thought I had one because I never talked about it. Like I just people don't understand. And I was going to school with a bunch of 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds. So um and a few of them saw it early. A few of them saw the tenacity I approached this with and the drive I had, and they saw this early. And luckily for me, some of those guys who saw it are in the NFL right now, so they actually wear them because they like them and they saw the whole thing unfold. But it was a tough sell sometimes, and it was cool because I actually told the coaches about it, and a few of my coaches actually invested in the early family and friends round when I was in school, and actually some of my teammates who had money did too. So it was for the ones who saw it, it was very very special for me.
What is the science behind your studs?
Yeah. So you mean how they're constructed or what they do?
How they're constructed, and then by virtue of that, how they're different than, say, if I went to Dick's Sporting Goods and bought a pair of cleats.
So our studs flex, and they give, they spin, they swivel, they pivot, whatever you want to call it, they move. Um, and they move because of the way they're engineered to the bottom of the cleat. All cleats, whether they're molded or screw-ons or bladed, they're all attached to the sole in a specific way and orientation. And ours has a post, and the post comes into the stud. And usually the post is encased in some sort of plastic or rigid material, but ours is encased by a rubberized material that allows it to freely swing any direction. So that little movement creates the give that's necessary to alleviate the force at the ground level. So if a player goes to plant, he or she plants, they're trying to go right or left. Cleats are naturally designed to grab the ground and increase traction. Traction equates to performance, but excessive traction equates to injury. So our studs just alleviated the ground. So we've tested multiple biomechanics labs, and every time we test versus a Nike premium offering or Adidas, we actually reduce more force in the knee and hip every single time.
At what point did you realize that you had something that could change the game?
Um, it was 2 years ago. I was at the school I just coached at, Colorado State Pueblo, and the quarterback who I knew well was wearing a pair of Caddix, and we only had 50 pairs at the time, so they weren't even available for sale yet. But I wanted him to kind of wear test them through games. And my friend Grant and I, who is part of the company, we were at the game. We were watching this guy roll out his quarterback. He was rolling out and went to go plant, and his knee buckled, and he fell. And Grant and I are like, "Oh my god, he tore his ACL." And then he got up and he threw 500 yards that game. And we went to him after the game and we said, "Do you know what happened to you and that play over there?" And he's like, "No, I don't know what happened at all." We got the film actually, and it's the exact mechanism of an ACL tear. It's exactly what happens. His foot gets caught, his knee buckles. You can see the force travel, but then you can see the cleat slip off the ground. So that was the moment I was like, all right, this is no longer me trying to sell this to people. Like this is tangible evidence. This is proof. This is a really, really good first step in getting the medical side taken care of this whole equation. So that was definitely one of the moments.
I mean, I would I would think it would take a pretty significant batch of evidence to convince the medical staff like you guys have that this is an issue, and not only is this an issue, but we have a solution.
Yeah. So as it relates to medical advisors and I have 10 orthopedic surgeons on my board, and they're all incredible people. And um, it's not tough to sell this to them. There we go. But it's tough to sell the athletes who aren't informed about the issues. Like selling this to a lower body orthopedic surgeon is the easiest thing I've done in my life because they see it. They know how biomechanics works. They know how the ground reaction forces become injurious and excessive. But telling a parent of a 10-year-old that this will help reduce force, they need a bit more concrete evidence, but evidence that they can relate to and read. I can show them a biomechanics study and they have no idea what they're looking at. It looks like gibberish, which it is. But as it relates to the medical advisors, it's an easy sell. It's not a sell. They've sold me, and these guys I have on my board. I'm not paying them. They're invested. They are all invested in Caddix. So It's very true through and through.
When you're selling this idea, this cleat to someone, how much do you explain to them about the medical side versus the performance side?
It depends who I'm talking to. I think each pitch I have is altered to the audience. For the most part, though, I talk about both, because if you talk about how much that stud wiggles and flexes, and that's a novel concept for people. And people immediately go to, well, I bet you I'm slower. And I thought kind of the same thing. So we went to BYU and tested versus Nike on these like pro day combine drills. And we were actually fast in every category. So I see the first part and I see the second part right after because those are the only two things people care about. And people are willing to jeopardize their safety if they perform well, which is a sad, sad reality. But if we can offer a product that addresses both evenly, that's a win in my book for sure.
Let's talk specifically about your board members. I saw that you have a director of lacrosse. Is that a position that you envisioned requiring?
So she's an employee. She does lacrosse. Her name's Susie. She's incredible. She does lacrosse. She does back end biomechanics. She does team sales. She does everything. I don't know how she does it. So I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and that's a lacrosse mecca. And when I made these cleats, I thought that they would double as lacrosse cleats eventually, but then the organic market that we tapped into was unbelievable. And it kind of warranted a lacrosse rep because I played basketball and football. I don't know a damn thing about lacrosse. So she came on. I met her at an event last year in Southern California, and she approached the booth and asked questions. And within 40 seconds of meeting her, I said, "Do you need a job?" She was incredibly gregarious and likable, well spoken. You can tell she's very smart. She played across at Stanford, so she's smarter than everybody in my company. But that's a role that I wanted to kind of allocate effort towards because that's an underserved market as well. Lacrosse players have been wearing football cleats and soccer cleats forever. There's no lacrosse specific cleats. There's no like tangible effort made towards that entire sport. They're going to buy sticks and cleats because they're available. That's it. But if we can alter and kind of address the nuances that are needed from product standpoint, we're going to do it. So I think it starts with Susie for sure.
Can you kind of juxtapose the cleats required for sports like football versus soccer versus lacrosse and even versus baseball now that you see a lot of baseball being played on artificial turf?
Yeah, I mean the sad reality is that it's not changing. No one's altering their cleats for surfaces. No one's altering the way they manufacture cleats for gender or age. I mean, cleats inherently have sucked. I'm just going to call it what it is. So, baseball cleats have been the same, football, soccer, but they're making turf shoes, which just aren't cleats. But with turf shoes, you lose traction. That's kind of the only effort I see towards a specified channel of footwear. But no one's doing anything about the the injury problem, and especially because we're all going to turf. It's expensive to maintain grass. It is, but you pay X amount to put turf down, then you're done until you need new turf. So everyone's going to turf, but no one's adjusting to the turf itself. And I'm not going to lie to you, grass and turf are both not great. I know turf is constantly being vilified in the media, but grass isn't doing much better because of the grass nowadays. It's like a golf course or a carpet. It's not very giving, and you can actually dig into the ground with your cleats. So you get lower to the ground, which the forces down there are a bit more dangerous than the ones up top. So, but no one's addressing the issues that need to be addressed.
How do you see the cleat market changing now that we are moving more toward artificial surfaces?
So I think it starts with the consumers. So the athletes, the consumers are getting more informed and intelligent. They really are. They're aware of the deleterious effects of turf and long-term effects of, playing on those surfaces that are unforgiving in nature. And I think the cleat market, with the exception of Caddix and a woman's brand called Ida, no one's trying to be specific in how they approach footwear. But the need is there, the want is there, the desire is there from the athletes. We go to these lacrosse events in person and people try these cleats on, and it's like stepping into a slipper. When I made these cleats, I sent out a survey to 1,000 college athletes saying, "Why do you hate your cleats?" And it was very apparent, very evident. Well, my toes hate me. They don't break in. They're rigid. They're stiff. They cause blisters. So, functionality and performance aside, we've sent NFL players cleats on Saturday night, and they've won them in Sunday morning's game with no break-in period. So, addressing all the aspects of cleated footwear is really important. But I mean, I'd say we're the only ones addressing all of them.
Can we talk a little bit about the biomechanics of Caddix cleats and how you kind of got to this point and what factors specifically you're focused on?
So the first part of that question I didn't hear. I heard biomechanics and on.
Oh, I was asking, can we talk about the specific biomechanic factors that you guys are changing with Caddix versus a traditional cleat?
Yeah, absolutely. How do I put this in a way that will be easy to listen to? So during a knee injury, there's something called knee valgus, and it's when your knee kind of flares out to the lateral portion. And it starts with hip adduction. So your hip goes in and your knee goes out. We've tested at labs and we've found every time we test that wearing Caddix reduces both of those moments. And especially in female athletes who have a wildly dramatic and inconvenient Q angle, the relationship between your hip and knee for biological purposes, women are already halfway there if you think about it. So that's exactly why women are so much higher at risk for knee injuries because the knees are already halfway there. So we're trying to limit that where we can. And and I hate it, but I know there are factors that I cannot control as a person who manufactures cleats, like biological clocks, like certain clocks and certain services and injuries and muscle strain and certain weaknesses and like those kind of things that I can't do anything about. But if I can limit the force that is the ground is kind of giving back to you, that's what we're going to always do. And we're a company that's not going to make we're not going to make bracelets and socks. We're always going to make products that help athletes. And I think from a biomechanical perspective, it starts with testing, but it starts also with athlete feedback. Like if we can get some tangible data, which we're already doing right now, it'll be published very soon. But about that knee valgus moment, that's huge for players, women specifically, and just kind of the whole system of cleated footwear. So those are the kind of things we're trying to do. And trying to calm down the neuromuscular facilitation relationship we have with muscles because everything is tested differently, but everything's tested almost in an antiquated way. If you test and tell a person to run to a specific spot and stop and then turn, they're telling themselves that you need to slow down when you see that little square. But if you were to do a reactive test and turn everything off and just let the muscles go, that's a more practical approach to testing as it relates to how we move and operate as athletes in competition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I saw that the NFL attributes 20% of its injuries to knees and only about 5% to head injuries, which is getting a ridiculous amount more exposure.
Yeah. And there's a reason for that. Um, I'll touch on the head injuries first. I think, first of all, the Guardian caps are great.
Yeah,
There's
I'm actually interviewing them, the C-suite from Guardian later this week.
yeah. So is it
They're
Aaron?
they're a great product.
Oh, they're even better people.
Yeah.
They've figured out how to channel that market and kind of take hold of it. And I contribute a lot of the concussion reduction numbers to those guys. And
Yeah, I'm really excited for that one.
yeah, absolutely. Aaron and Lee are great, and Jake's great, and they're all awesome. But on top of that, the game is kind of changing too, in the way you're allowed to tackle. You can't lead with your head, you can't chop block. Like those are the things too. But I'd say guardian caps is a huge component of that. But knee injuries, man, it's very fragile. It's very contentious because you have a playing surface that's being vilified by the masses. Like, oh, we need to get rid of turf. But you look at Pat Mahomes go down, that's on grass. Look at Michael Parsons go down, that's on grass too. So no one wants to talk about the common denominator. If you can tear your ACL and your knee on grass and turf, We should look at the common variable, which is what's on your feet. But no one wants to, because I honestly think those companies don't want to address it. Those big behemoth companies who monopolize the markets, like they don't have to address it. But we're the first non-licensed product purchased by NFL teams in NFL history. So we are going to weasel our way in there for sure. But it's an issue that needs to be addressed and just frankly hasn't.
I mean, I know we've been talking a lot about ACL tears. What what kind of aim do you guys have at ankle and like lower extremity muscle injuries?
Yeah, so if you think about what's in a helmet, it's padding, right? Because padding absorbs force. So the constant and whether it's a head-on-head collision or it's just overall wear and tear of the game, it's reducing some sort of force. So our studs flex, and it reduces force that's absolutely injurious, but also just constant wear and tear throughout competition. So, from a muscle perspective, that could alleviate some soreness and strain and swelling and inflammation, absolutely. But ankle injuries, we found the ankle isn't as compromised wearing Caddix because if there's an uneven playing surface and you're rolling like this, our studs flex and it can catch and create an even one pretty quickly. That makes sense. We've also found that the hip is reduced in that internal torque that causes hip injuries as well with testing. So we're with the goal in mind of targeting all lower extremity injuries and trying to alleviate them, not prevent them, just reduce the likelihood of them. We're going from the hip down for sure, the knee being the centerpiece of that. But we've definitely gotten some very, very good feedback about the ankle and hip from biomechanic testing and also athlete feedback as well.
What kind of presence do your cleats have in rehab scenarios?
It's a strong one. If we do have data that we reduce force of the knee, and a lot of people reach out to us saying, "Hey, I'm coming back from an ACL injury. I bought your cleats, and rehab has been smooth. My doctor said I'm healing. I'm rehabbing well. I'm getting back in the field soon." So there's definitely a place for it. I can't speak on the percentage or the numbers or all that stuff, but I think we made a product that's intuitive enough for people who have sustained injuries go to this as a result and an option for when they're coming back to play.
As you're looking at the expansion of this product, of this brand, are you looking from the perspective of increased technology and innovation, or are you looking at from the perspective of increased sport experience?
I think it's both. Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, technology is constantly advancing, but sport is constantly advancing. And I drive past fields all the time. I see like 6-year-olds running in agility ladders with like parachutes attached to them. I'm like, "Dude, you're 6." I mean, so I think just the way in which we train and the rate in which we are involving ourselves in training at the age we are, I think it's just an amalgamation of both, to be honest with you. And then we involve NIL and parents want their kids to get their school paid for and be successful financially one day, but they're like 9. So I think it's both at this point.
Is there anything else about your cleats that you think that I missed? Either about the technology behind them, the innovation, your board members, your C-suite. I mean, working with your dad, for example, what does that business look like?
Um, it's fine. It's good. He and I were he was more involved in the early stages, and he still does stuff now. But it's just I'm running around with my head cut off all the time. So it's been my project, but the idea was originally my dad's. To be honest with you, he thought that something should give it the ground, and he's like, "I don't have time for it," and I just took it and ran with it. His idea originally wasn't as practical from a manufacturing standpoint, but after my studies and all this thing, I realized that his concept would apply if we were approaching in different ways in the context of engineering and construction of cleats. But yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's been great to go to these meetings with him and get on calls with people, and he's there, and it's good. My sister's involved with the company. She does our fulfillment out of the warehouse in Baltimore, and like it's good. It's I'm very lucky.
Is there anything else that you think that I missed about telling your personal story, the story of your brand, the story of the cleats? The floor is yours. My questions are
I would
open.
mention that the women's cleats are actually made off a woman's foot, which is kind of the first of its kind for lacrosse, second of its kind for soccer because Aya does it. But you know, women have been wearing men's cleats forever, and it's really rewarding and special, and borderline emotional to see a girl put her foot in Caddix at a lacrosse event and say that it makes sense to me. That's extremely validating, and not for selfish reasons, but for the female athlete who has been wearing her brother's cleats for forever. Her feet aren't given a fair chance, and that's also what we're trying to figure out is how do we bridge that gap? How do we close that gap as it relates to equipment in sports so women aren't, always an afterthought. So that's kind of all.
I mean, how do you see this brand growing in its reach and its application in the next 15 years as sport continues to advance, as
Yeah.
needs kind of shift? Where's your place in the industry?
I think we'll be the industry. I think we'll be a viable option for cleated footwear in the next year, which we already are. I think then the next phase is to be the first option of cleated footwear and other footwear. We're talking different sports in a few years. And the next stage is being the only option. I think if we're going to make products, like I said, we're not going to make bracelets and socks and scarves. Like we're going to make functional products that help athletes stay on the field and the court. And I think given our very, very organic reach already and our biomechanical data that we're going to have the next few months, we very well could be the only option. I think that's where we're headed.
That's incredible. Thank you so much, Jack. Let me see when this episode will go live. I think you do have a fair amount of time, so if anything happens between now and then, reach out to me. I'll include it in this episode, and I'll get you that date in 1 second.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a bunch. And great questions, by the way.
Thank you.